This is the Caffeinated Risk Summer Show with your self-proclaimed grumpy security professionals, Tim McCreet and Doug Leese.
No company wants to spend the money that you should be spending on security. And I'm looking at that energy sector article that you sent to me. Nobody wants to spend the kind of money you would need to actually secure an organization and truly understand every asset and the risk to every asset. Nobody wants to do that, right?
I don't think that's even possible, let alone good business.
Yeah.
But yeah, maybe that was our original topic. And then,
I know,
but something happened. But it's kind of interesting how this conversation about ethics and race to the bottom and labor costs. And I don't know if you saw the news this morning, but apparently the reason for the outage was maintenance.
Yeah.
That doesn't surprise me, because if you look at most of the critical infrastructure incidents that have occurred over the years, they're not typically cyber.
No.
They can be, and they are more likely to be now than they were. And we're already seeing serious evidence of this going on. And we're seeing lots and lots of people poking at the edges, and we're seeing lots of evidence that systems are being infiltrated if they're not already compromised fully. And of course, with the war going on and Canada being on the NATO side, the fact that a third of our people suddenly don't have internet and telephone sounds a lot like what the Ukrainians were going through a couple years ago. So you can't blame anybody for saying, is this cyber? I think that was the right thing to definitely exclude that. We responded as if. And in fact, I wound up being on call as a result of this.
I was going to ask, you probably were, right?
I'm on the other carrier, and the guy that was on call was on Rogers.
Gotcha.
And he couldn't get a page.
Oh, man. That sucks.
It's like, hey, do you want to switch? Now, on that, it's like, well, why would that even work? Because wasn't he talking to you on his phone? Yes, through Wi-Fi using Signal. So the messaging app from Rogers wouldn't work, but the third-party app sitting on top riding over the Wi-Fi would work. So, Signal rocks. Just got to shut that out to those guys.
And we have no shares.
No shares,
that,
no money,
no
I'm not even giving them any money.
I
don't get a special logo or nothing. But I think that they've met that bar where there's two paths. If I'm roaming somewhere, because I was down in the States last week, I was using whatever U.S. roaming thing, and my signal worked just like I was in Canada, which is great. And then when I'm in the house, it uses the Wi-Fi, except when the Wi-Fi is down, and then it knows to do the other. That's all smart. And it's like, well, how come my Interac doesn't work like that? Well,
yeah, sadly, it's a little more complicated. Yeah.
I think if we look at what they're claiming is the root cause right now, which is maintenance, having worked at another telecom in the plumbing side of the business for a number of years. And full disclosure, I actually worked for Rogers for about 3 years. My ex-wife and I had a bunch of cellular phone stores.
That's right. I remember. That's right.
And I had Glentel satellite stuff. Like, I was totally.
Oh man, you're dating yourself now, right?
Totally into it. It's like, and first waves of wireless or digital telephony. Motorola, TDMA, all that kind of stuff.
Yep.
And of course, I was at the third major Canadian provider as in their security arm. So, I've been around the telecom business for 25 plus years. I know that area of the world pretty well. So I know people that work in this business, they know what they're doing.
Yep.
I also know most of them are really old, relatively speaking. And so there's less of them that are skilled at that level that can handle things like a major upgrade to core routers and stuff like that. But it's happened before. You start doing core router upgrades and your whole network goes down. Yeah, that happens.
Yeah.
And it usually happens because of software incompatibilities.
Yeah.
Equipment didn't perform like it should. Somebody thought the backup was this, but it was actually this other version. And all of these pieces have to work together or it doesn't work at all. I think that's what people miss. So I think personally, it's like, that's very cool. They got it back on and working in less than a day.
Yep. Yeah, actually, that's the recovery time for me was pretty impressive, I'll be honest, right? With that kind of a failure and a major, if it was in their major core routers or if it was in those systems, and you and I have both seen this before when an organization does only a good job in change board or, putting in the rec to put things together, but with the complexity that most networks have, and not, unless you're going to chase every lead when you're doing your change management process, you're eventually going to have to react on the fly. I thought they did a good job for getting it back in a day. It's just the impact was felt by literally a third of Canadians, and networks as diverse as 911, right?
More than a third.
Yeah, it was the 911 systems, Interact, all of that.
Yeah, I think that's really the takeaway here is that, telcos know what they're doing. They don't have enough people because there's a skill shortage and there's price pressure on those people. I know a couple people working in the telecom industry that were packaged out and now they're back.
Sure.
And they're training people that can barely hook up two wires. And the reason that that's the case is because they're not willing to pay for, engineers and stuff to come in. The pressure on the telcos, of course, is more money for your shareholders.
Yep. Yeah, lower the operating cost. Yep.
And so where's the ethics there of...
Yeah. I mean,
I have an obligation because this is a national network and it impacts our very way of life. Or I got to make 2 cents more a share, or I'm not going to get my bonus.
Yep. There was a couple of things I thought of during that whole outage, and I kind of linked it back to that energy sector document that you sent my way.
Yeah.
And one of the things that came up right away is as soon as the outage was identified and people started, talking about it in the news, everyone linked it to cyber, to a potential cyber attack, or they're exploring the cyber attack and they didn't get any response from Rogers. No, because Rogers is busy fixing the thing. They're not going to tell you what it is yet. But do you know what I drove for me? 10 years ago, we never would have brought up the idea that it was a cyber incident.
Yep.
Now we are.
Which is good. We're moving on. We're moving on up.
Okay. I'll take that as a kind of a half-ass win, just because it at least people think about that as a potential now. And
because it is. It's definitely always a potential. You cannot ignore it anymore.
Yeah, it is. And just the way you described it is we're in the middle of there's a horrific war that's being waged against Ukraine. We've seen the aggressor and what that country did for a few years before they launched their physical attack. We saw what they've done to others. We know what other nation states have the capability of. We know that critical infrastructure is a target for virtually any nation state or bad actor because of the crippling effect. We saw what happens with, this is going to sound horrible and I'm not minimizing what happened, with a scheduled upgrade to a core router in a telecom in Canada, right? If it goes sideways. Can you imagine what would have happened had that been an actual malicious attack with the ability to fracture the network or to hold most of it hostage?
Yep.
And how that would have played out in the media or what that would have done to folks. We're seeing our reliance. And that was the other part that showed to me that during the whole outage is the concept of resilience. Or lack of resilience, I guess, is another good way of putting it. And, the CEO of the company actually got on and talked about that they're going to make their networks more resilient. Yeah, but you're not going to make the structure of the Canadian telecommunication environment more resilient unless you're going to allow a whole bunch of more players in and carve up the field, right? You're still going to have reliance on just a few actors. And I think that's the case with virtually every critical infrastructure. There isn't a dozen power companies I can select my power from. There isn't too many places I'm going to get my water from, or my energy systems from. I'm not going to have multiple natural gas pipelines coming into my house. I'm not going to have two different water feeds coming into my home.
Well,
This is where, again, this concept of resilience means it should be more than one, but we're not there. Right?
but there's a trade-off. You said carving up the field, but
Yeah,
literally you have to go dig a second set of holes
absolutely
to
Yep.
run this stuff.
Yep.
And when you look at certain parts of Ontario and, company you used to work for,
Yeah.
they have these lovely bits called right-of-ways.
Yes.
And it's like from this many feet, east and west of my train track or my, my road or whatever it is, I'm allowed to dig in there and put down whatever I want. And like good business folks, they say, well, let's run some fiber optic cable, let's run a pipeline, let's run a this, let's run a that.
Yep.
And as a result, you wind up with all of this stuff running down the same path. And I remember going through this with another place that I worked at. We were looking at two telco providers, Bell being one of them. We were looking at another one. And somebody pointed out it's not going to matter because where your data center is, both carriers use the exact same right of way to move their circuit back.
Yep.
So you're one backhoe mistake away from losing
all of your
circuits.
Yep, exactly.
And so it becomes more complicated. Well, let's do one in the ground and one over the air then. So we'll have a satellite backup or whatever. That's great, except that your performance over satellite is not even close to the same.
The latency.
Even if you bought all the same bandwidth, the speed doesn't work right. And, one good, now I got a backhoe cut and a rainstorm suddenly. Like there's lots of buts, right? So you're always going to have these single points of failure in your core infrastructure. But for the most part, they're going to be localized.
In theory, they should be. Yeah, in theory.
Yeah, so localized outages totally make sense. We can tolerate that. I think it's when it's a core capability, then it's going to affect stuff. And I think that's what people miss about the whole cyber threat. If I screw up one router, as a rule, I will screw them all up because you have to upgrade them all at the same time, or you have to push the config change to all of them at the same time.
To all of them. Yep, exactly.
And I think that's what people are missing is it's no longer localized. And even if you say, well, we've got redundant equipment and this and that, it's like, sure you do. But where'd you get the software from? And how do you know the software's right? And how do you know the guy that or gal that did the config that's going on that got it right? Well, they ran it through test first. Does test even vaguely resemble prod? And dollars to donuts, at the end of all this whole upgraded maintenance thing, I bet you the reason that it's screwed up is that tried to be applied to routers that they forgot existed and they're barking because they don't have any asset management, right?
Well, and that's exactly, it always comes back to this. Do you know what you have exactly? Do you have a list of your stuff, right? And
the stuff that you need to make it work. And I think that's how we can balance that cost out.
Yeah. Well, you can't. And that's where, so again, I go back to this whole idea that the first part, like once you understand your business, what do you need to run your business? And that second question screws up everybody. In 40 years, I don't know of anybody, like any company, anyone where you and I have been, or any place that we've worked since or been around, folks have taken a crack at it and have tried, right? And some have done a fairly good job and done the best that they can. But no, I don't think any company that I'm aware of, whether I've worked for them or helped out or even read about them, no one's got a rock solid inventory of everything they need, or more importantly, everything I need to be successful every day. And I'm thinking a core router updated to the recent config probably is a requirement for a successful company that runs a telecom structure around the nation.
Yeah,
Just gonna put that out there.
I would agree. I think that knowing what business you're in. Now, arguably, the email server that you send your I'm angry message
Sure.
to isn't really essential to your business.
No, and I can let that die for a couple of days. Fingers crossed, they're still going to be sending more emails, so it doesn't really matter, right? That's a hole that's never going to get filled, right?
I guarantee you that thing works just fine because it's easy and simple, and they understand it. I think that this is the problem that I'm observing over and over again in different IT companies. They are focused solely on their world and what they look after and what they support. So, your CRM will be working and your email will be working. But you know what we do? We move data back and forth across the country over cells and all the rest of this crazy stuff.
Yeah.
And that equipment, well, that's these guys over here.
Yeah.
Just like in oil and gas, these areas that are actually controlling the phone conversation or the data flows, those are isolated networks too. That is just, nobody got phished and clicked on something and they brought down the whole. That's not how it's.
That doesn't. Yeah, it doesn't work that way.
That's like a fenced off wall, man.
Yeah.
Like for sure there are holes and everything, and I'm sure I'll be getting hate mail from people that I used to work with. I didn't mention that machine, but you know what?
Yep.
For the most part, it's not going to happen that way.
Yeah.
But a real nation state actor could navigate those holes
potentially,
and take over that infrastructure, because once you're inside that environment, by design, it has to be able to communicate to each other.
Yep.
And it's going to do exactly what it's told. So if you have a machine that says apply this config to all of these devices, guess what it's going to do? It's going to apply the config to those devices. I don't care whether they're PLCs or core routers.
Exactly.
Now, do you trust that config?
Well, that's the question.
Do you trust the account that is applying that config? That's a different conversation again. And those ones are the ones that are tough to resolve, because it's not only more expensive, it's also so far away from anything that the CEO and the HR VPs and all those people look at. They're looking at getting Teams on their phone and go, oh, this is great. And it's like, in the meantime, your routers are 18 revs out or whatever. So you better patch all the things.
Yep.
And I've never had experience where a patch actually made things worse. I don't know about you, but
no.
Well, I'm kidding.
I got to go back and
grab the dice, roll them, and see how it goes.
Yeah, exactly. Hope for the best, right? So
yeah. Absolutely. So they're racing to try and meet it because they've got somebody that says all your equipment must be within this rev of X, or you're not compliant and I'm going to mark you down on my naughty list here.
Yeah.
And sometimes the cure is worse than the disease.
Well, I kind of wanted to ask about that. Yeah. I kind of wanted to, in this last, we're in July now, so this is our summer edition, and it's a chance to look back on what's happened this year. And
everybody else does this at New Year's. I was like, no, we'll do it in the middle of summer.
We're doing it in July. This is like Black Friday in July. So I had a chance to go back and look at some of the legislation that's been put forward by the Canadian, U.S. governments, and some of the stuff we're seeing across the globe, and I think they're great steps forward. They are. I mean, there's nothing in that standard isn't what you should be doing as a good business anyway. The issue that I'm having, though, it's the industry's response to the legislation, and I shouldn't say abject terror. That's not the best way to put it, but it's like, oh my God, we can't do this. This is going to take forever. Or this is going to take so long, or we don't think that this is an appropriate response or a control or requirement. And I struggle with the why, the response. I get it from a profession's perspective. You want to give your company the best chance for success. Absolutely. But if someone's asking you to report on an incident that's occurred within a certain period of time, I think I'm okay with that as well. Like, it doesn't bother me that if you need me to tell you in 12 hours or 24 or 48 and 72, but you need to share the information, because We don't. Or like security folks don't. Like if something bad happens, first thing you do is you close the wagons, fix the problem, and say nothing because you don't want anyone to know what the hell happened to your company. Nor do you want to give the bad guys the tip that, oh, this is what happened, right? So the issue I'm having and the struggle I'm trying to have is we will never get better at this if, one, we can't get ahead of a government regulation and do a better job internally and then share best practices. Or two, when we finally get caught because we didn't do our homework, or we didn't apply best practices, or we weren't looking at things from a risk-based perspective, and a legislative body does, then we just accept it and move on. And I know everyone who hears is going to go, oh my God, I can't believe you're telling, allow Big Brother to run us and the government shouldn't tell us what to do. Yeah, but you should have, and you didn't.
Well, you
right?
should have.
That's my perceptive, right? But we should have been doing this anyway. As security professionals, that should have been our first charge, is to find ways to reduce the risk.
This kind of goes full circle back to the ethics thing. So if you read those ethics guidelines, and they're all pretty much the same, but in the British one, the ACM, they talk about, above all else, if there's a tie, because that's the problem with ethics, is it's usually a dilemma of some sort.
Yeah.
Is you need to go for the greatest good. And so we look at Rogers specifically.
Yep.
And it's not Rogers' fault that their stuff broke. Well, it is, but it's not. Like, welcome to IT. Have you tried turning it off and on again?
Yeah.
My God.
Patched your phone lately? Anyone?
Stuff happens, okay?
Yeah.
And it breaks, and good for them. They got it back in less than a day. That's pretty good. Their service that they provide was used by a third party. And that affected way more than 10 million people, because we've moved, for the most part, to cashless society. There's a real cost here. And so the minute you're taking on things like you're providing the communication for a different service, the greater good is just that much more obvious. So, to say to somebody at Rogers, you can't cut corners, I need that. Why is that?
Yeah.
Because you know what? If our network screws up, you can't actually pay for your coffee at Tim Hortons.
Exactly.
What?
Yeah.
You didn't know that? And you start to piece these things together. So TELUS has 9 million people, or like wireless people, right?
Subscribers. Yep.
Did you know they have almost 21 million medical clients?
Frightening, isn't it? Yeah.
Yes.
They've invested heavily in
and so they're delivering
medicine.
this other service that provides, I'm assuming communications for medical devices or hospitals. I didn't dig into the details, but that sounds more important than not having a cell phone. Just like not having Interac was a big deal for Canada.
Yeah.
There's a genuine cost to the economy for this screw up. And you start to unravel those things. This was one day. I'm doing some work right now with the Idaho National Labs folks, and they call it cyber-informed consequence-driven engineering.
Oh, wow.
The fancy name, we call it CCE for short. But the idea, again, is when a piece of critical infrastructure is damaged to the point where you can't get it operational within a critical time period, their time that we're using right now is more than a day, but it's not like 6 months. It's a very short time frame before they're thinking pandemonium is going to start to occur.
Well,
and you think, people were flipping out with a day of no internet.
Isn't that crazy?
Could you imagine if it was a week?
This is what's frightened me. So there's a great book. Ted Koppel wrote a book, and it's after he retired. It's called Lights Out.
Yes.
And it's about just that. If you haven't read it, please do, right? Because I had a chance to hear him speak at our ASIS conference, because he came in and gave that presentation, and we talked about it, and he had a chance to talk through it. And then we sat down and listened to a smaller session with him about it. So this is where my head is going, is you talked about ethics and the requirement for us to do the greater good, right? And to always err on the side of the greater good. And I looked at what Bill C-26 is trying to do here in Canada, and even C-27 from the privacy perspective, and then the 5 pieces of legislation that the Biden administration had put forward, the TSA work, plus some amazing, like if, again, if our listeners, if you want to take a look at some really cool piece of legislation, the Security Exchange Commission has created it was a proposed rule, and it was a fairly substantial document where they closed comments on 18th of May, and then they were looking at invoking this probably in the latter part of this year if it gets approved. But it required you to have someone with the title of Chief Information Security Officer, with the board of directors being briefed on cyber risks, with someone on the board having experience and knowledge about cyber risk management and cyber risk assessment techniques or methodologies, and then reporting it again to CISA, et cetera. And then the next one after that followed right after that was the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Administration, which includes medical devices, put forward a ruling as well, where the requirements to secure health devices was included inside that proposed change. So if I look at all of these things that are coming at us from a legislative and regulatory requirement, and again, I'm a big fan of, I'm good with it because we should have been doing this anyway. Yep. We should have been regulating ourselves, but we didn't because of all the things you talked about. The margin for profit, the pressure on operating expenses, the cost containment and reduction strategies, the lack of resources. So I think all of this, we finally got to a place where I'm hoping I can marry up my governance and ethics structure with my regulatory framework and create a better space where, just like you said, we know that the infrastructure that's critical to us, it should be table stakes. Yeah, you know what? I will pay more for my cell phone service. I will. Or I'll pay more for my internet service from my provider if they're also linked to healthcare services or 911 or supporting Interact or Visa payments. If it means that I got to spend a little more to get a greater level of assurance, and that may meet a regulatory requirement along the way, I think there's a space where all of these things can finally knit together. And, we earned this. It's like your mom and dad telling you what to do and then actually making you do it because they said, I remember as a kid, you should probably go get your hair cut because it's getting long. I'm good, right? And then, you carry on for another month and then finally your dad's taking you to the barbershop and you come home with like half an inch of hair on your head. It's because he gave you a warning. He gave you an opportunity. He even gave you the money to go get your hair cut and you still didn't. So I look at us in the same space where we were given warnings back in the 80s and 90s. And you and I both know this. We chased toll fraud way back in the day. And we knew that bad guys were going to do stuff like this. We knew that our telecommunication structure and energy and electrical and water were going to be under attack. It's because of people who they are. We knew that back in the 80s and 90s. As the internet came out in 94, 95, in the early 2000s, we have seen the progression of simple viruses through to polymorphism right through to ransomware. We have seen this come our way for over 25, almost 30 years now. Why is it surprising that government, and it's taken them 30 years, have finally come up and said, hey kids, you got to do this. Yeah. And now you got to do it because we're telling you. And now you're going to do it because we're going to fine you. And link that now with the ethical statements, just like you talked about, where we need to do the greater good. So why can't the two merge and support each other to create the concept of a resilient environment, knowing that we are going to have issues? Because like you said, someone's going to push an upgrade and it's going to fail because it finds an older router going, hey, hello, load this up. What are you talking about? I'm not loading this bullshit. And then that's it, right? It starts the storm and the network's down. So for us, I think we finally got to that space where enough pressures come from a legislative requirement that we need to do this. And now we're looking at the ethics, and now we're looking at the empathy, and we're looking at the human going, we have to be better at this, because just like we proved with a one-day outage, what would happen if this was a week or a month? Or what if we actually lost, like here in Alberta, what if we actually lost natural gas during the winter? Or power in the summer for air conditioning? Like what would happen with that, right? We've seen enough of this around the world. We don't need to live that pain anymore. Why can't we just appreciate that legislation is there for a purpose? Ethics are there to be at least followed and adhered to. Can we find that happy space where governance is an actually appreciated umbrella to cover both? So I think we've got this great opportunity now. If we all just took a breath and a step back and looked at what we needed to do to run that resilient, interconnected organization from an ethical perspective. Yeah, that's where I think I want to drive the rest of my years in this business, is to get to that space. And I know we talk about a lot here on the podcast, but I think, talking about it like this today and getting it out to our folks, our listeners, I hope that starts their conversations. And that they listen to it and go, you know what? I should be asking these questions, even if it's just they stop and everyone listens and thinks about it. Well, but who's looking at it within my company? Because we buy these routers all the time, but we offer a different service. What do I need to run every day? And then, are you doing the right thing? Are you doing the thing for the greater good? Yeah. Fingers crossed. That's what we start those discussions inside our listeners' companies, is, are you doing things for the greater good?
Yeah, I think that is an excellent way to wrap this up. That might even be the show title.
There we go. Thanks for listening to the latest podcast from Caffeinated Risk. Make sure you visit our website, caffeinatedrisk.com, to stay up to date on what we've been working on. Our website has bios of our podcast guests, posts about topics we're passionate about, and even a library of reference material we find valuable in the work we do every day. And don't forget to subscribe to Caffeinated Risk on your favorite podcast service. This way, you'll be notified when we release our next podcast, and you can listen to our previous guests just in case you missed them. Thanks so much for listening to Caffeinated Risk.